Hey, how's it going? This is Eric with Solve Cycle Solutions, and in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the event watch module inside of Make that can be applied to a variety of different apps. Basically, this is going to be trying to understand some of the differences between when to use an API and when to use a webhook. So if you struggled understanding those terms or struggled with working with event watch types inside of Make.com, then you've come to the right place. Let's get to it. So hopping into my screen, you'll see that I have 4 different modules from 4 different softwares that all have some variation on the term watching an event. This is a specific command type inside of Make.com that can be used to gather information from the respective softwares. Now, these all may look the same, but there are some very different functions just beneath the surface here. So you may notice this clock next to the Google Drive icon. First off, this is indicating that this is the trigger to start the entire automation. If you see a clock, that is called a polling trigger. That means that this trigger is scheduled to run at specific scheduled intervals based on whatever time you are requesting. So if I open this up, you'll see that it's set to run at a regular interval of 15 minutes. We could modify this to be every 60 minutes. You could have it run every 120 minutes. You can also schedule this to run specific days of the week, specific dates of the year, days of the week, months. And what's going to happen is when that trigger hits the specific interval that it's supposed to, Make is going to go over into, in this case, Google Drive, and basically ask, hey, are there any new files that are added to this specific folder? Google is going to say yes or no. If it does find new information from the last time it checked, it's going to extract that information and pull that data out so that we can see what that information is. So it's going to pull that information, and it should only pull new information when it goes back and checks again in another 15 minutes because there hasn't been any changes since we last pulled this information. And if I click and drag this clock to change the trigger to toggle, you'll see the clock is the exact same thing. So it's only going to update me on that exact information. But if I drag this polling trigger icon over to SmartSuite, you'll see that I don't have a clock anymore, but I have a lightning bolt. That means that this is an instant trigger. This is sending information one way from SmartSuite to Make. It doesn't care if the information is new or not. It is saying that when a new record is created inside of SmartSuite, it's going to send that information over to Make to extract that information. If I want to try and run this trigger inside of Make, let's see what happens. I honestly don't know where this is processing. It says use existing data. Let's see what happens when I hit wait for new data. And it's just going to keep running because there is no new option, new record I have inside of my SmartSuite database. But if I created a record inside of the specific solution in SmartSuite, it would notify me of that. And a similar thing happens with Stripe, where I can click and drag that and it's a lightning bolt. It's only going to send me information when new data is there. Any polling trigger you see means that this software is communicating through an API. It is making a loop where Make is reaching out, asking if there's information, and then returning any new information that that software has to offer. This information here with the lightning bolt is done through a webhook, which is basically an HTTP request through Make.com that is integrated with the software already. Using a webhook is more of just a one-time request each time that the webhook is used. you will see if you Google some of this that sometimes the API is more considered like a constant communication versus the webhook. So these are just very basic definitions to understand certain terms like the polling triggers versus the instant triggers. Now, the other big question is why can I only use a polling trigger with Google Drive versus Stripe? And some of that, unfortunately, just boils down to what is allowed through the specific software. There are certain things that you can't use. Like, unfortunately, I would love to have an instant trigger for the Google Drive so I could send the exact information that I want instead of having to go back and set something on a timely basis. Unfortunately, that's just not set up in Make. There are ways that you can do certain functions like that in Zapier, specifically for things like Google Calendar, but there is no rhyme or reason for why certain softwares have the polling trigger and others have the instant one. Now that we have that understanding of what a polling trigger does and how an instant trigger works, I want to show you how I use both in different variations to help me kind of streamline some of the work and save some of the notifications and general upkeep that I have to use in my business. This first instance that I want to show you involves working with Stripe and this watch event function. So I use Stripe as my payment processor, and I currently use it to help with invoice management. And one function that I learned early on was using the watch events type for when I send out invoices. The reason that I have this set up is that I want to keep track of the exact time that I sent out an invoice so I can keep track of who still owes me money and if I need to apply late fees based on a specific time. I don't want to always go and update that information myself inside of my records, and I actually have this set up as a billing invoice solution inside of SmartSuite. So you can see here, I've set up a draft invoice that I've already sent to Stripe, but what will happen once this automation runs is it's going to mark the status of this invoice as sent, and it's going to update the date sent to this particular line. The reason that this works is because I use this watch event. And what will happen is inside of Stripe, as soon as I send this invoice, it's going to notify my watch event and say, hey, something new was just completed. Do you want to use this? So I have it to, on a very basic level, watch the event. It's going to filter out specific data, but I'll talk about that in a minute. It will retrieve the specific invoice and then find the email of the user in SmartSuite and then update that information from there. And you'll see that this is set to, again, specifically update the status down below here as sent. And then I have the date sent updated to this exact moment when this automation is run, so that I don't have to worry about it and I can have my systems manage that for me. So inside of Stripe, I have this very basic $250 invoice that I'm sending to myself. So if I send this, I can hit send invoice there, and then give this a minute. We'll hop back into Stripe, and you see that this picks up and it's run and updated all that information and mapped that inside of my SmartSuite list. Have to refresh, of course, to get the new information, but you'll see that this was sent status, and then we have the date sent as today at the time of this video at 3:15 in the afternoon. But the reason that I'm going so in depth talking about this is because I want to show you what the event looks like once it's been identified. So you'll see that it has, first off with this bundle, the raw webhook data. So you also know that we are working with a webhook command here. And you'll see in this object, it pulls out all the information that I want with this particular invoice setup. So I have a customer ID, I have the customer email, there's lots of information here that I will be using for this particular automation. Now, you'll see some other things like data where it has object is listed as an event. And what we can do is we can identify the specific data that we're looking to filter out, because Stripe is sending out so much information on all these different events. You could have a payment being made, you could have a product being updated, a customer being updated. There's lots of different variations that could be filtering in an event. I don't need every single event type to run through this system. I just need to know when an invoice is being sent. So this is where having a filter is very useful, because we can create filters based on the status of an event type. This is also very helpful understanding a little bit more about how webhooks work and the HTTP commands. So if you are using an event type, you need to match the specific ID that will help filter out this information. So when I set this up, you can see that I have the event type listed as invoice.sent here. So I could mark the status as paid on this invoice, and it's not going to run through another whole automation. Instead, it will pick up the one watch event, but then it won't go past the filter. This is a con of the watch events inside of make.com, that especially if they are an instant trigger, you don't really have control of what is going through or how many times is going through. You will be using operations based on any new information that's coming in. So if you have a lot of data that will be categorized in this, and you only need it one or two times or specific information, that may not be the best use of this watch event to set up a trigger. In this case, I am looking for a very specific purpose, and I am not having to constantly update or have this information be chewed through with Stripe. So this example works for me here. Now that you've seen how the instant watch event types work inside of Make, I want to show you briefly how the polling can work, and maybe this is something that you can use in your own system. Now, I will say that I thought I originally had the polling watch event type set up with a different system. I didn't, so I built just a very basic example to show you how this can work. Go figure that Google Calendar has the same polling trigger status as the Google Drive, but basically what I have here is set up a watch event. The Google watch events have a little more detail as well in terms of what you can filter out inside of the specific watch event module versus the instant watch module. So this is one more benefit to using the polling kind of watch event, but the main thing that I'm showing here is that inside my calendar, I have this specific filter set up for anytime a title of an event is 30-minute free consultation, that it sends a notification over to my email, and this automation is set to run at, in this case, every 2 minutes, just for the sake of time. If you have a specific use case and would like to try and explore this a little bit more, this is also a great segue to book one of my free 30-minute consultations. So if you are interested, there is a link in the description, and you can book a free 30-minute call as early as the next day. So let's see what time we can save you in just 30 minutes. So now that that very smooth segue is completed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the save event here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just create a second event as well and put this as example 2. And why not? Let's just do a third example here so that you can see this system working in action. So if we hop back over here, I'm going to go ahead and hit the run once. And what Google is doing, Make has asked, hey, do you have any new events? And Google Calendar looks and says, oh, I have 3 right here. And so it has sent 3 emails to my test email saying, hey, this person has this event. I could map a lot of information if I wanted to, but you can see that if I hit run once again, this is going to come back completely empty, saying that there has not been any new changes since the specific automation was run last time. So this is a very useful use case if you're trying to monitor things on a regular basis and want to make sure that nothing is really missed. Now, again, there are some cons here, but they vary also from what the instant trigger was. So in this case, if you have a trigger that is running every 2 minutes during the day, that's going to be a lot of operations inside of make.com used up as well. So that is something to consider. If you find that a lot of information is collected in these intervals, that may also consume a lot of operations depending on what you're looking for. Now, you can absolutely filter down some of this information dependent on what you're looking for, but it really does vary on figuring out what's important to you, whether you want specific control to use an instant trigger with the webhook commands, or if you're trying to maintain a constant conversation with an API. So I hope that gives you some clarity on what the difference is between these different watch type events and seeing how you can utilize them in your system. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments of the description of this video below, or you can also book a free 30-minute consultation like I said earlier, and I'm happy to help you get more in depth on how this can be used in your specific use case. Thank you for watching. Like I said, I hope you got a ton of value out of this video, and be sure to stick around and see what else there is on my channel. I have a video over here that you may find interesting as well based on what the YouTube algorithm suggests. But in the meantime, that's all I've got to say on this topic, so thank you for watching. Take care.